Judge Patricia Williams looked at her watch as she drove down the quiet street. It was almost 10 p.m. The judicial conference had run late again. She was tired and ready to get home to her family. Patricia had been a federal judge for 8 years. She worked hard to get where she was. Growing up in a poor neighborhood, she had studied day and night to become a lawyer. Now she was one of the most respected judges in the state. But tonight she just wanted to go home. The street was empty except for a few cars parked along the sidewalk. Big houses sat behind perfect lawns. Streetlights cast long shadows on the road. Patricia knew this neighborhood well. Many of her colleagues lived here. She had been to dinner parties in some of these houses. Her black BMW moved smoothly down the street. The car was her one luxury. She had worked hard for it. After years of driving old broken cars, she finally had something nice. The leather seats were comfortable after a long day in court. Patricia was thinking about tomorrow's cases when she saw the red and blue lights in her mirror. Her heart sank. She pulled over to the side of the road and waited. She had not been speeding. She always drove carefully. 2 police officers got out of their patrol car. Officer Johnson was tall and thin with cold blue eyes. Officer Martinez was shorter and stocky. Both men walked slowly toward her car. Their flashlights cut through the darkness. Patricia rolled down her window and placed her hands on the steering wheel. She knew how to act during a traffic stop. She had seen too many cases go wrong when people moved too quickly or said the wrong thing. "Evening, ma'am," Officer Johnson said. His voice was flat and unfriendly. "Do you know why we stopped you?" "No, officer. I don't believe I was speeding," Patricia replied calmly. "Your left tail light is out," Officer Martinez said, shining his flashlight at the back of her car. "License and registration, please." Patricia slowly reached for her purse. "I'm going to get my license from my purse," she said, making sure both officers could see her hands. As she pulled out her wallet, Officer Johnson's flashlight beam hit her jewelry. She was wearing her grandmother's pearl necklace and gold earrings. Her wedding ring sparkled in the light. "Nice car," Officer Johnson said, but his tone was not friendly. "What kind of work do you do?" "I work for the federal government," Patricia answered, handing over her license and registration. Officer Martinez took the documents and looked at them carefully. "Patricia Williams," he read aloud. "This your car?" "Yes, it is." "You sure about that?" Officer Johnson asked, walking around the car. "This is an expensive ride for someone your age." Patricia felt a familiar knot in her stomach. She had dealt with this kind of questioning before. "I bought it 2 years ago," she said quietly. "Bought it or financing it?" Officer Martinez asked with a smirk. "I bought it," Patricia repeated. The officers looked at each other. Officer Johnson shined his flashlight through the car windows. "You live around here?" "No, I was driving home from a work meeting." "What kind of meeting?" Officer Johnson pressed. "A conference downtown." "What kind of conference?" Patricia took a deep breath. She could feel the situation getting worse. "A judicial conference," Officer Martinez laughed. "A judicial conference? What are you, a court secretary?" "Something like that," Patricia said, not wanting to make things worse. "Must be a pretty good secretary job to afford a car like this," Officer Johnson said. He was now looking at the interior of her car. Real, leather seats, navigation system. "This car cost more than I make in a year. May I ask what this has to do with my taillight?" Patricia asked politely. "We're just making conversation," Officer Martinez said. "Making sure everything is on the up and up." Patricia knew what that meant. They thought she was a drug dealer or a thief. They thought there was no way a black woman could legitimately own such a nice car. "You got any drugs in the car?" Officer Johnson asked suddenly. "No, I do not." "You sure about that? You seem nervous." "I'm not nervous, I just want to get home to my family." "Family, huh? Husband work too?" "Yes." "What's he do?" "Let me guess. Also a secretary?" Patricia bit her tongue. She wanted to tell them exactly who she was. She wanted to see their faces when they realized they were talking to a federal judge. But she had learned over the years that sometimes it was better to stay quiet. "He works downtown too," she said simply. Officer Martinez went back to their patrol car to run her license. Officer Johnson stayed by her window, shining his flashlight around the car. "You know, we don't see many people like you in this neighborhood," he said. "People like me? You know what I mean. This is a nice area. Quiet. We like to keep it that way." Patricia gripped the steering wheel tighter. She had heard these words before. When she was in law school. When she first became a judge. When she moved to her current neighborhood. There was always someone who thought she didn't belong. "I was just driving through," she said. "Where exactly are you coming from?" "The Marriott downtown. The conference was there." "The Marriott? That's a fancy hotel. Must have been some secretary meeting." Officer Martinez came back from the patrol car. "License is clean," he told his partner. "No warrants or anything." "Good," Officer Johnson said. "But I'm still curious about this car situation." Patricia watched as more neighbors started to come outside. Porch lights came on. People stood in their doorways watching. She felt embarrassed and angry at the same time. Woman across the street opened her front door and stepped onto her porch. Patricia recognized her. It was Mrs. Henderson, the wife of another federal judge. They had met at several court functions. Mrs. Henderson squinted in the darkness, trying to see what was happening. "You know what?" Officer Johnson said. "I think we need to take a closer look at this vehicle. Make sure everything is legal." "Officer, I have done nothing wrong," Patricia said firmly. "We'll be the judge of that," Officer Martinez said with a laugh. Patricia closed her eyes for a moment. She thought about her children at home, waiting for her. She thought about the cases she had to hear tomorrow. She thought about all the years she had worked to earn respect, only to be treated like a criminal on a quiet street. The traffic stop was just beginning, but Patricia already knew it was going to be a long night. Officer Johnson put his hands on his hips and stared down at Patricia through her car window. The friendly mask he wore at the beginning was completely gone now. His partner, Officer Martinez, stood behind him with his arms crossed. "Ma'am, I need you to step out of the vehicle," Johnson said. Patricia's heart started beating faster. "May I ask why?" "We need to conduct a proper inspection of this vehicle. Make sure everything is legitimate." "Officer, you said this was about a taillight. I showed you my license and registration. Everything is in order." "Are you refusing to cooperate with a police investigation?" Martinez asked, stepping closer to the car. Patricia knew she had no choice. She slowly opened her door and stepped out. The cool night air hit her face. More neighbors had come outside now. She could see them standing on their porches watching like it was some kind of entertainment. "Put your hands on the hood of the car," Johnson ordered. "Is that really necessary?" Patricia asked. "I have not committed any crime." "We'll determine that," Martinez said. "Hands on the hood. Now." Patricia placed her hands on the warm metal of her car's hood. She felt humiliated. Here she was, a federal judge, being treated like a common criminal in front of a neighborhood where many of her colleagues lived. "Nice watch," Johnson said, looking at the gold Rolex on her wrist. "Real gold? Yes. Must be nice to have such expensive things. That watch probably costs more than most people make in a month." "I work hard for what I have," Patricia said quietly. "Oh, I bet you do," Martinez said with a laugh. "What exactly did you say you do again, secretary work?" "I work for the federal government." "Doing what exactly? Filing papers? Getting coffee for the real workers?" Patricia took a deep breath. These officers were trying to make her angry. They wanted her to lose her temper so they would have an excuse to arrest her. "I work in the federal building downtown," she said calmly. "The federal building," Johnson repeated. "Big place, lots of janitors work there, cleaning ladies, security guards. Which one are you?" "I am not a janitor or a cleaning lady." "No? What then? Don't tell me you're trying to pass yourself off as some kind of lawyer or something." The way he said lawyer made it sound like a joke, like the idea of her being a lawyer was the funniest thing he had ever heard. Patricia felt her anger rising, but forced herself to stay calm. "I do work in the legal field." Both officers burst out laughing. "The legal field," Martinez said. You hear that, Johnson? She works in the legal field. Let me guess, Johnson said, walking around to look at her from the side. You're a paralegal, right? Maybe a court reporter? Type up documents for the real lawyers? Something like that, Patricia said. It was easier than explaining the truth. These men had already made up their minds about who she was and what she was capable of. Well, Miss Legalfield, Martinez said, explain to me how someone who types documents can afford a $60,000 car. $70,000, Johnson corrected. I looked it up when I ran her plates. This model starts at 70 grand. $70,000, Martinez whistled. That's a lot of typing. Patricia said nothing. She stared straight ahead at the house across the street. Mrs. Henderson was still on her porch talking to another neighbor. Patricia wondered if she recognized her yet. You got a second job? Johnson asked. Maybe something you do on the weekends? Something that pays cash? The implication was clear. They thought she was involved in something illegal, drug dealing probably, or prostitution. They could not imagine any legal way for a black woman to have nice things. I have only one job, Patricia said. One job, Martinez repeated. In the federal building doing secretary work, and somehow you make enough money for a $70,000 car, expensive jewelry, and designer clothes. Patricia looked down at her outfit. She was wearing a simple black suit from Nordstrom, professional but not flashy. Her pearl necklace had been her grandmother's. The earrings were a gift from her husband. Nothing she wore was inappropriate or overly expensive. Those are real pearls, aren't they? Johnson asked, pointing at her necklace. They were my grandmother's. Your grandmother's, he repeated with disbelief. Right. And I suppose she was rich too? She was a hard-working woman who saved her money. Saved her money? Martinez laughed. From what? Cleaning houses? Patricia bit her tongue. Her grandmother had indeed cleaned houses. She had worked as a maid for wealthy families her entire life. She had saved every penny she could so her children and grandchildren could have better lives. There was nothing shameful about her work, but these officers were using it to mock her. Where did you really get this car? Johnson asked suddenly. I told you. I bought it. From a dealer. Yes. With what? Cash? I financed it through my bank. Which bank? Chase. Chase Bank gave you a loan for $70,000? Yes. Based on your secretary's salary? Patricia was getting tired of the questions. Based on my income and credit score. What's your income? Martinez asked. That's personal information. Not anymore, it isn't. We're conducting an investigation. What do you make a year? Patricia knew she did not have to answer, but she also knew that refusing would only make things worse. I make a comfortable living. How comfortable? 50,000? 60? More than that. How much more? Patricia said nothing. 100,000? Johnson asked. You expect us to believe the government pays a secretary $100,000 a year? I am not just a secretary. What are you then? Patricia paused. She was tired of this game. I am a legal professional. A legal professional, Martinez repeated. You mean like a paralegal? I have a law degree. Both officers stopped talking for a moment. Then Johnson started laughing again. A law degree, he said. From where, some online school? Harvard Law School, Patricia said quietly. The laughter stopped. Both officers stared at her. Harvard, Johnson said slowly. You're telling us you went to Harvard? Yes. And now you work as a secretary. I told you I am not a secretary. Then what are you? Patricia looked at both officers. She could tell them the truth right now. She could end this humiliation immediately. But something inside her wanted to see how far they would take this. She wanted to see just how badly they would treat someone they thought was beneath them. I work for the court system, she said. Doing what? Legal work. What kind of legal work? I cannot discuss the details of my work. Martinez stepped closer, to her. Listen, lady, we've been patient with you, but our patience is running out. You're driving an expensive car through a wealthy neighborhood at night. You claim to work for the government but won't tell us what you do. You're wearing expensive jewelry and designer clothes. This whole situation smells fishy. There is nothing fishy about it. I am a law-abiding citizen going home from work. From work at 10 p.m.? Yes, sometimes my work requires long hours. What kind of secretary work requires long hours? Johnson asked. Patricia did not answer. I think we need to search this vehicle, Martinez said to his partner. I do not consent to a search, Patricia said firmly. We don't need your consent. Johnson replied, We have probable cause. What probable cause? Suspicious behavior. Expensive car that doesn't match your stated income. Evasive answers to simple questions. Patricia knew this was wrong. She knew they had no legal right to search her car. But she also knew that arguing with them would only make things worse. All she could do was stand there and let them violate her rights while her neighbors watched from their porches. The real humiliation was just beginning. Officer Martinez walked to the passenger side of Patricia's BMW, while Officer Johnson kept watch over her. She stood with her hands still on the hood of her car, feeling the eyes of her neighbors burning into her back. This is an illegal search, Patricia said calmly. You have no probable cause. Save the legal talk for someone who cares, Johnson replied. You've been watching too much TV? Martinez opened the passenger door and started going through her glove compartment. He pulled out the car's manual, insurance papers, and registration documents. Then he found something that made him pause. Johnson, come look at this, he called. Johnson walked over to see what his partner had found. It was Patricia's business cards. They were simple, cream-colored cards with gold lettering. Patricia watched as Martinez held one up to the street. Light. Patricia Williams, Esquire, Martinez read aloud. United States District Court. Both officers stared at the card for a moment. Esquire, Johnson said with a snort. She thinks she's a lawyer. Anyone can print business cards, Martinez added, tossing the card onto the ground. Probably ordered them online for $10. Patricia watched her business card flutter to the asphalt. Those cards had been made by the court's official printer. They were real, just like her law degree and her position. But these officers had already decided she was lying. Martinez continued searching through her car. He pulled out her briefcase and opened it on the hood of the car, right next to where Patricia's hands were placed. Look at all these papers, he said, rifling through her legal documents. Court cases, motions, briefs. This lady really committed to this act. Patricia's briefcase contained sensitive legal documents, cases that were currently before her court, confidential information that these officers had no right to see, but she could not stop them without making the situation worse. These look real, Johnson admitted, looking at one of the documents. They probably are, Martinez said. She probably stole them from the law office where she works. Cleaning lady with access to the copy machine. More neighbors had gathered now. Patricia could see at least 8 people standing on various porches and lawns. Some were holding phones, probably recording video. Others were just watching like it was a show. Mrs. Henderson had walked closer. She was standing at the edge of her front yard now, squinting in the darkness. Patricia hoped she would recognize her and say something, but Mrs. Henderson was too far away to see clearly. What's this? Martinez asked, pulling out a leather folder from Patricia's briefcase. Inside the folder were copies of legal opinions Patricia had written. Her name was printed clearly at the top of each document along with her title, The Honorable Patricia Williams, Chief Judge. Johnson grabbed the papers and looked at them. Chief Judge Patricia Williams, he read. Then he started laughing. This is rich. She's not just pretending to be a lawyer. She's pretending to be a judge. A federal judge, Martinez added, looking at the letterhead. The chief judge, no less. Lady, you could get in serious trouble for impersonating a federal official, Johnson said. That's a felony. I am not impersonating anyone, Patricia said quietly. Right, Martinez said. And I'm the President of the United States. The officers continued searching through her car. They looked under the seats, in the trunk, and in every compartment they could find. They were looking for drugs or weapons, or anything that would justify their treatment of her. Car's clean, Martinez finally admitted to his partner. "Keep looking," Johnson said. "There's got to be something." Patricia watched as they went through her personal items. Her gym bag, her lunch containers, even her emergency roadside kit. They handled everything roughly as if her possessions meant nothing. A man from across the street had walked over. Patricia recognized him as Mr. Chen, another federal employee. She had met at work functions. He worked for the Treasury Department. "Officers, is everything all right?" Mr. Chen asked. "Just a routine traffic stop, sir," Johnson replied, suddenly polite. "Nothing to worry about." "It doesn't look routine," Mr. Chen said, looking at all of Patricia's belongings scattered around her car. "We're investigating a suspicious vehicle," Martinez explained, "making sure everything is legitimate." Mr. Chen looked at Patricia for the first time. In the darkness, he could not see her face clearly. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. "I am fine. Thank you," Patricia replied. "She claims to be a federal judge," Johnson said with a laugh. "Can you believe that?" Mr. Chen looked confused. "A federal judge? Yeah, she's got fake business cards and everything. Even has documents with some judge's name on them. Patricia Williams or something." Mr. Chen stepped closer, trying to get a better look at Patricia's face. The streetlight was behind her, casting shadows that made it hard to see her clearly. "Patricia Williams?" he repeated slowly. "That's what the fake documents say," Martinez said. "Pretty elaborate scam, if you ask me." Patricia looked at Mr. Chen hopefully. She had spoken with him several times at court functions. He knew who she was. He could end this nightmare right now. But Mr. Chen was still too far away and the lighting was too poor. He shook his head and walked back toward his house. "Even the neighbors think you're crazy," Johnson said to Patricia. The officers had now been searching her car for 20 minutes. They had found nothing illegal, nothing suspicious, nothing that justified their treatment of her. But they were not ready to give up. "These legal documents bother me," Martinez said to his partner. "Where would she get access to real court papers?" "Maybe she works for a law firm that handles federal cases," Johnson suggested. "Cleaning lady with access to confidential files." "Or maybe she's involved in some kind of identity theft," Martinez said. "Stealing judges' identities to commit fraud." Patricia could not believe what she was hearing. They were now accusing her of identity theft and fraud, all because they could not accept that a black woman could be a federal judge. "Officers," she said carefully, "I understand you are doing your job, but this search is illegal, and you are making serious accusations, without any evidence." "Evidence?" Johnson said. "Lady, you're driving a car you can't afford, wearing jewelry worth more than most people's houses and carrying around fake legal documents. That's plenty of evidence for me." "The documents are not fake." "Right," Martinez said. "And you're really a federal judge." "I am." Both officers laughed again. Other neighbors who could hear the conversation started whispering among themselves. Patricia could hear fragments of their comments. Claims to be a judge. Probably a drug dealer. Those people always have an excuse, and the humiliation was complete. She was standing on a public street, surrounded by her scattered belongings, being mocked by police officers while her neighbors watched and whispered. This was not how federal judges were supposed to be treated. This was not how any human being was supposed to be treated. But Patricia knew the night was not over yet. These officers were determined to find something wrong with her, and they would not stop until they did. Or until they discovered who she really was. The moment of truth was coming soon. Patricia had reached her breaking point. She had stood there for 30 minutes while these officers violated her rights, mocked her achievements, and humiliated her in front of her neighbors. She had tried to be patient. She had tried to de-escalate the situation, but enough was enough. "Officers," she said firmly, "I need to show you something." "More fake documents?" Martinez asked with a smirk. "No," Patricia replied. "My real identification." She slowly reached into her purse again. Both officers tensed up, their hands moving, closer to their weapons. "Easy," Johnson warned. "Nice and slow." Patricia pulled out a black leather wallet. Inside was something she rarely had to use: Her federal judicial identification card. It was different from her driver's license. This card had special security features, a federal seal, and her official photograph. "Here," she said, holding out the card. Johnson took it without really looking at it. He was still focused on searching through her belongings on the car hood. "Another fake ID," he said, barely glancing at it before trying to hand it back. "Look at it," Patricia said firmly. "I don't need to look at it, I already know what it is." "Look at it," Patricia repeated, her voice stronger now. Martinez noticed the change in her tone. "What's she going on about now?" Johnson finally looked, down at the card in his hand. His casual attitude disappeared immediately. His face went pale. The card was clearly official. It had federal seals, special holographic features that could not be faked, and official government printing. At the top, in bold letters, it read, "Federal Judicial Identification." Below that was Patricia's photograph and her full title. The Honorable Patricia Williams, Chief Judge, United States District Court, Eastern District. Johnson's hand started shaking slightly. He read the card again, thinking his eyes were playing tricks on him. "Martinez," he said quietly. "Come here." "What is it now?" Martinez walked over, still annoyed. Johnson handed him the card without saying a word. Martinez looked at it and his jaw dropped open. This can't be real," Martinez stammered. "It is real," Patricia said calmly. "I am Chief Judge Patricia Williams of the Federal District Court, the same courthouse where you officers testify regularly, the same building where I sentence criminals and oversee federal cases." Both officers stared at her in shock. The confident, mocking attitude they had displayed for the past hour evaporated instantly. But you said you were a secretary," Johnson said weakly. "No, I did not. You assumed I was a secretary. You assumed I was a cleaning lady. You assumed I was a drug dealer. You assumed everything except the truth." Martinez looked at the ID card again, then at Patricia, then back at the card. I am really a federal judge, the chief judge of this district, and you have just conducted an illegal search of my vehicle while violating my civil rights." The color drained completely from both officers' faces. They suddenly realized the magnitude of what they had done. They had not just harassed some random citizen. They had humiliated a sitting federal judge. A judge who had the power to impact their careers, their department, and their lives. "Ma'am, we didn't know," Johnson said, his voice completely different now. All the arrogance was gone, replaced by panic. "You did not know because you did not ask," Patricia replied. "You made assumptions based on my race and gender. You decided I could not possibly be what I claimed to be." Martinez was still staring at the ID card like it might disappear. "We were just doing our job," he said desperately. "Your job was to cite me for a broken taillight," Patricia said. "Your job was not to search my car illegally. Your job was not to mock my education or question how I could afford my possessions. Your job was not to assume I was a criminal." Both officers looked around nervously. The neighbors were still watching, and some were definitely recording with their phones. This was not just a career-ending mistake. This was a national news story waiting to happen. "Judge Williams," Johnson said, trying to sound respectful now, "we sincerely apologize if we had known—" "If you had known what?" Patricia interrupted. "If you had known I was a judge, you would have treated me with respect. What about all the other citizens who are not judges? Do they not deserve the same respect?" The officers had no answer for that. Mrs. Henderson had walked closer during the commotion. She could now see Patricia's face clearly under the streetlight. "Patricia," she called out. "Patricia Williams, is that you?" Patricia turned toward her colleague's wife. "Hello, Mrs. Henderson." Mrs. Henderson's eyes widened as she took in the scene. Patricia's belongings scattered all over her car. The two officers standing there looking guilty and panicked. The crowd of neighbors watching. "Oh my goodness," Mrs. Henderson said. "What on earth is happening here?" "These officers stopped me for a broken taillight," Patricia explained calmly. "Then they decided to search my car because they did not believe I could legitimately own it." Mrs. Henderson looked shocked. She knew Patricia well. She knew her reputation, her achievements, her character. Officers, Mrs. Henderson said firmly, do you realize who you're dealing with? This is Judge Patricia Williams. She's one of the most respected jurists in the country. Now other neighbors who recognized the name started paying closer attention. People began whispering among themselves. The Judge Patricia Williams? The one who was on the Supreme Court shortlist? The one who wrote that famous civil rights opinion? Johnson and Martinez looked like they wanted to disappear into the ground. Not only had they humiliated a federal judge, but they had done it in front of witnesses who knew exactly who she was. Ma'am, Your Honor, Martinez corrected himself. We had no idea. We're very sorry. You should not need to know someone's title to treat them with basic dignity, Patricia replied. But since you do seem to care about titles, let me be clear about something. I am not just any federal judge. I am the chief judge of this district. That means I oversee the court where police officers from your department testify every week. The implications hit both officers like a truck. Patricia could influence their cases, their credibility, their entire department's relationship with the federal court system. Your Honor, please, Johnson begged. This is all a big misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? Patricia asked. You misunderstood my race? You misunderstood my right to drive through this neighborhood? You misunderstood the Constitution's protection against illegal searches? More neighbors had gathered now, including several who recognized Patricia. The story was already spreading through the crowd. I want both of your badge numbers, Patricia said firmly. Ma'am, please, Martinez started. Badge numbers. Now. With shaking hands, both officers provided their badge numbers. Patricia memorized them immediately. I also want the names of your supervisors. Your Honor, can't we work this out? Johnson pleaded. Work what out? The fact that you violated my civil rights? The fact that you conducted an illegal search? The fact that you treated me like a criminal because of my race? The officers had no response. They stood there looking defeated while Patricia began collecting her belongings from where they had scattered them around her car. The revelation was complete. The tables had turned completely. The officers who had been so confident and arrogant 30 minutes ago now looked like scared children. But Patricia was not done with them yet. The real consequences were just beginning. The two officers stood frozen as Patricia calmly collected her legal documents and placed them back in her briefcase. Their earlier confidence had completely disappeared. Officer Johnson kept looking at his partner, hoping Martinez would know what to do. But Martinez was just as panicked. Your Honor, Johnson finally said, his voice shaking. Maybe we can start over here. Patricia looked up from organizing her papers. Start over? Officer, you cannot undo what you have already done. But we didn't know who you were, Martinez said desperately. If we had known you were a judge. You keep saying that, Patricia interrupted. Let me ask you something. If I had been a white woman in this same situation, would you have searched my car? Both officers looked uncomfortable. They knew the answer, but neither wanted to say it out loud. If I had been a white woman driving this car through this neighborhood, would you have questioned whether I could afford it? We were just being thorough, Johnson said weakly. Thorough? Patricia asked. Is that what you call assuming someone is a drug dealer because of their race? We never said anything about drugs, Martinez protested. You asked if I had drugs in the car. You searched every inch of my vehicle looking for illegal substances. You made comments about my income not matching my possessions. What else were you implying? The officers could not answer because they knew she was right. They had profiled her from the moment they saw her face. Mrs. Henderson approached the group. Patricia, I am so sorry this happened to you. This is absolutely disgraceful. Thank you, Margaret, Patricia replied. I've known Judge Williams for years, Mrs. Henderson said to the officers. She is one of the finest people I know. The idea that you would treat her this way is unthinkable. Johnson looked even more uncomfortable. Ma'am, we really didn't know. That's not an excuse, Mrs. Henderson said firmly. You should treat every citizen with respect regardless of who they are. Other neighbors had joined the conversation. Mr. Peterson, a retired lawyer, shook his head in disgust. This is exactly the kind of behavior that gives police departments a bad reputation. Officers, said Mrs. Chang, who worked for the city council, I hope you realize this incident will have consequences. Serious consequences. Martinez was sweating now despite the cool night air. Look, everyone makes mistakes. Can't we just forget this happened? Forget it happened? Patricia asked incredulously. You want me to forget that you violated my constitutional rights? That you humiliated me in front of my neighbors? That you treated me like a criminal for 30 minutes? We were doing our jobs, Johnson said, but his voice lacked any conviction. No, you were not. Your job was to give me a citation for a broken taillight and let me go. Everything else you did was wrong. A new voice joined the conversation. What's going on here? It was Detective Sarah Collins from the same police department. She had been driving through the neighborhood when she saw the commotion. Johnson and Martinez looked relieved to see their colleague. Maybe she could help them get out of this mess. Collins, Martinez said quickly. We've got a situation here. Detective Collins looked at the scene. Patricia's belongings still scattered around, the crowd of neighbors and her two colleagues looking like they had seen a ghost. What kind of situation? She asked. We stopped this lady for a broken taillight, Johnson explained, and then things got complicated. Collins looked at Patricia, who was standing calmly by her car. Ma'am, are you okay? I am fine, Patricia replied, though I cannot say the same for your colleagues' careers. What do you mean? Collins asked, confused. Mrs. Henderson stepped forward. Detective, these officers just spent half an hour illegally searching Judge Williams' car and treating her like a criminal. Judge Williams? Collins looked closer at Patricia. Like many local law enforcement officers, she had heard the name but never met Patricia in person. Are you really Judge Patricia Williams? I am. Collins's face went pale. She turned to her colleagues with a look of horror. Please tell me you did not just harass a federal judge. We didn't know, Martinez said quickly. She didn't tell us. She shouldn't have to tell you, Collins snapped. You should have treated her with respect, regardless of who she was. Patricia watched as the three officers argued among themselves. She could see the panic spreading as they realized how serious their mistake was. Your Honor, Collins said, turning back to Patricia, on behalf of the entire department, I apologize for this incident. Detective Collins, Patricia said, while I appreciate your apology, you were not involved in this incident. These two officers made their own choices. Johnson tried one more time to minimize the situation. Your Honor, maybe we can handle this internally. You know, cop to cop, professional to professional. Patricia stared at him in disbelief. Cop to cop? Officer, I am not a cop. I am a federal judge. And you just violated my civil rights in front of a dozen witnesses. But surely you understand the pressures of law enforcement, Martinez said desperately. Sometimes we have to make quick decisions. I understand the law, Patricia replied firmly, and I understand that what you did tonight was illegal. More cars had stopped to see what was happening. Some were neighbors coming home late. Others were people who had heard about the incident through social media. Someone had already posted a video online. Detective Collins pulled Johnson and Martinez aside. Do you two realize what you've done? She whispered angrily. You've created a public relations nightmare for the entire department. We were just doing our job, Johnson repeated, but even he did not sound convinced anymore. Your job was to write a ticket and leave, Collins said. Instead, you decided to play detective and harass one of the most powerful judges in the state. How are we supposed to know she was a judge? Martinez asked. It doesn't matter, Collins hissed. You should have treated her with respect either way. Patricia could hear parts of their conversation. She was not surprised by their attempts to justify their actions. She had seen this pattern many times in her courtroom. Officers who made mistakes and then tried to blame everyone except themselves. Officers, Patricia called out, interrupting their whispered conference. All three turned to look at her. I want to make something very clear, she continued. This incident will be reported. There will be an investigation. There will be consequences. Johnson looked like he might be sick. Your Honor, please. We have families. We can't lose our jobs over one mistake. You should have thought about your families before you decided to abuse your authority, Patricia replied coldly. Can't we work something out? Martinez begged. Maybe some kind of community service or extra training? Patricia looked at both officers for a long moment. They were pathetic now, begging for mercy from the woman they had spent the last hour, mocking and humiliating. Officers, she said finally, you spent 30 minutes treating me like a criminal. You searched my car illegally. You mocked my education and my achievements. You assumed I was a drug dealer because I am a black woman with nice things. And now you want to work something out? Both officers stared at the ground, unable to meet her eyes. The time for working things out was when you first pulled me over, Patricia continued. The time for respect and professionalism was 30 minutes ago. That time has passed. The damage control attempts had failed completely. The officers had revealed their true character, and there was no taking back what they had done. Their careers, their reputations, and their futures were now in the hands of the woman they had wronged, and Patricia was not feeling merciful. Within hours of the incident, news had spread throughout the legal community and beyond. Patricia arrived at her chambers the next morning to find dozens of messages from reporters, colleagues, and civil rights organizations. Her assistant, Maria, looked overwhelmed as she handed Patricia a stack of phone messages. Judge Williams, Maria said. The phone has been ringing all morning. The Washington Post wants an interview. CNN is asking for a statement. The NAACP called twice. Patricia sat down at her desk and looked through the messages. She also had calls from other federal judges, the Chief Justice's office, and several legal organizations. The story was bigger than she had expected. There's also this, Maria said, handing her a tablet. Someone posted a video of the incident online last night. It already has over 1 million views. Patricia watched the video. It clearly showed the officers searching her car while she stood with her hands on the hood. The audio captured their mocking comments about her being a secretary and their disbelief when she mentioned Harvard Law School. It was painful to watch, but it was also evidence. Her phone rang. It was Judge Robert Martinez, the chief judge of the appellate court and an old friend. Patricia, he said, I just saw the video. I am so sorry this happened to you. Thank you, Robert. It was quite an experience. Have you filed a complaint yet? I'm planning to file several complaints today. Internal Affairs, the State Attorney, General's Office, and the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Good. This behavior is unacceptable. These officers need to face consequences. After hanging up with Judge Martinez, Patricia called the Internal Affairs Division of the Police Department. She spoke with Captain Williams, who seemed genuinely shocked by what had happened. Judge Williams, Captain Williams said, I want you to know that this behavior does not represent our department's values. We will conduct a thorough investigation. Captain, I have body camera footage, witness statements, and a video that's gone viral. This should be a straightforward case. Absolutely. Both officers have already been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. We take these allegations very seriously. I hope you do, Captain, because I will be watching this investigation closely. Patricia also called the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Agent Thompson listened carefully as she described the incident. Ma'am, based on what you've told me, this sounds like a clear violation of your civil rights under federal law. We'll open an investigation immediately. Thank you, Agent Thompson. I'll send you all the evidence I have. One question, Judge. Williams, are you planning to file a civil lawsuit as well? Patricia paused. She had not thought much about a lawsuit. She was more interested in seeing the officers held accountable and preventing this from happening to others. I'm considering all my options, she said finally. By noon, the story had made national news. Patricia's assistant showed her the headlines on various news websites. Federal judge illegally searched by police after traffic stop. Body camera shows. Officers mocking black judge. Chief judge files civil rights complaint against police. Patricia's phone rang again. This time it was her husband, David, calling from his law firm. Honey, are you okay? He asked. I just saw the story on the news. I'm fine, David. Just dealing. with the media attention. "The video is heartbreaking to watch. I can't believe they treated you that way." "I can believe it," Patricia said sadly. "This is what many people go through every day. The only difference is that I have the power to do something about it." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure there are consequences. Real consequences." That afternoon, Patricia held a press conference outside the federal courthouse. Dozens of reporters gathered to hear her speak. She stood at the podium in her judicial robes, looking calm and dignified despite everything she had been through. "Yesterday evening," she began, "I was stopped by police for a broken taillight. What should have been a simple traffic citation turned into an hour-long ordeal in which my civil rights were violated and my dignity was attacked." She paused as reporters scribbled notes and cameras flashed. "I want to be clear about something," she continued. "This incident was not just about me. It was about the systemic problems in law enforcement that affect thousands of citizens every day. The difference is that most of those citizens do not have the privilege and platform that I have." A reporter raised her hand. "Judge Williams, what do you want to happen to the officers involved?" "I want them to face appropriate consequences for their actions. I want their department to implement real reforms. And I want this incident to serve as a wake-up call about the need for better training and accountability in law enforcement." "Are you filing a lawsuit?" another reporter asked. "I am exploring all legal options, but my primary concern is not money. It is justice and reform." "How did you feel when the officers finally realized who you were?" Patricia thought for a moment. "I felt sad. Sad that they could treat any human being the way they treated me. Sad that it took my title to make them show basic respect, and sad that this kind of treatment is probably routine for citizens who don't have federal judicial identification cards." After the press conference, Patricia returned to her chambers. She had several important cases to review, but it was hard to concentrate. The incident kept replaying in her mind. Maria knocked on her door. "Judge Williams, I have Officer Johnson's supervisor on the phone. He wants to speak with you." Patricia picked up the phone. "This is Judge Williams." "Your Honor, this is Lieutenant Brooks. I'm calling to apologize for the actions of my officers." "Lieutenant, while I appreciate your call, an apology is not enough. Your officers violated my civil rights and humiliated me in public." "I understand, ma'am. Both officers are facing serious disciplinary action. They may be terminated." "They should be terminated, and your department needs to examine why this happened and how to prevent it from happening again." "Yes, ma'am. We're already reviewing our policies and procedures." Patricia doubted that was true, but she said nothing. That evening, Patricia finally went home. Her children, aged 12 and 14, had already seen the news story. They were upset and confused. "Mom," her daughter asked, "why did those police officers treat you that way?" Patricia sat down with both children. "Because some people make assumptions about others based on their race. They thought because I was black I couldn't be successful or important." "But that's wrong," her son said. "Yes, it is wrong, and that's why we have to speak up when it happens." "Are you going to send those police officers to jail?" her daughter asked. Patricia smiled sadly. "It doesn't work that way, honey. But I'm going to make sure they face consequences for what they did." As her family went to bed, Patricia sat in her study reviewing the legal documents she would need for her various complaints. The incident had been traumatic, but it had also given her a platform to address larger issues of racial profiling and police misconduct. She thought about all the people who had been treated the same way she had been treated, but who did not have the power to fight back. She thought about the young black men who were stopped and searched for no reason. She thought about the black women who were questioned about their possessions and achievements. This incident would not be swept under the rug. There would be real consequences, real reforms, and real change. Patricia was determined to make sure of that. The fight for justice was just beginning. 2 weeks after the incident, Officer Johnson and Officer Martinez sat in a sterile conference room at police headquarters. Across from them were their union representative, the internal affairs investigator, and their department's legal counsel. Both officers looked tired and defeated. "Gentlemen," said Internal Affairs Captain Davis. After reviewing all the evidence, including body camera footage, witness statements, and the viral video, we have reached our conclusions. Johnson shifted nervously in his chair. Martinez stared at the table. Officer Johnson, Officer Martinez, you are both hereby terminated from the police department, effective immediately. You violated departmental policy, conducted an illegal search, and brought disgrace upon this department. Both officers had expected this outcome, but hearing it out loud was still devastating. Johnson had been with the department for 8 years. Martinez had 12 years of service. Their careers were over. You have the right to appeal this decision, Captain Davis continued, but I would not recommend it. The evidence against you is overwhelming. Their union representative nodded grimly. There was no defense for what they had done. Meanwhile, at the district attorney's office, Prosecutor Janet Collins was meeting with her team to discuss criminal charges against the officers. The civil rights violation is clear, she told her staff. They conducted an illegal search based solely on racial profiling. The federal government is also investigating. What charges are we looking at? Asked Assistant DA Rodriguez. Violation of civil rights under color of law, illegal search and seizure, and possibly conspiracy. The FBI is building a strong case. Will Judge Williams cooperate with the prosecution? Absolutely. She wants these officers held accountable, not just for her sake, but for everyone who might face this treatment in the future. Back at the police department, Chief Henderson called an all-hands meeting. The entire force gathered in the main assembly hall. The chief looked angry and disappointed. By now you've all seen the video, he began. You've seen how 2 of our officers treated a federal judge. But more importantly, you've seen how they treated a human being. The room was silent. Many officers looked uncomfortable. This behavior is unacceptable, Chief Henderson continued. It violates everything we stand for as law enforcement professionals. It damages our relationship with the community we serve, and it makes all of our jobs harder. He paused, looking around the room. Effective immediately, all officers will undergo mandatory bias training. We're implementing new protocols for traffic stops. Body cameras must be activated for all citizen contacts, and there will be random reviews of all stops to ensure compliance. Detective Collins, who had witnessed the aftermath of the incident, raised her hand. Chief, what about the officers who were terminated? Will there be criminal charges? That's up to the district attorney and the federal prosecutors, Chief Henderson replied. But I can tell you this. If any officer in this department violates a citizen's rights, they will face the full consequences of the law. At the federal courthouse, Judge Patricia Williams was meeting with representatives from several civil rights organizations. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the ACLU, and the Southern Poverty Law Center all wanted to support her case. Judge Williams, said ACLU attorney Sarah Johnson, your case represents something much larger than one incident. It highlights the systemic issues we've been fighting for decades. I understand, Patricia replied. That's why I'm considering filing a civil lawsuit, even though my primary goal is reform, not money. A civil lawsuit would send a powerful message, said NAACP attorney Marcus Washington. It would show that there are real financial consequences for this behavior. Patricia had been thinking about the lawsuit for days. She did not need the money, but she understood the symbolic importance. If I file suit, she said, any settlement money will go to organizations working on police reform and civil rights education. The attorneys nodded approvingly. A week later, Patricia filed a federal civil rights lawsuit against the city, the police department, and the 2 officers individually. The lawsuit sought monetary damages but also demanded comprehensive police reforms. The city's response was swift. Mayor Johnson called Patricia personally. Judge Williams, he said, the city deeply regrets this incident. We want to work with you to reach a resolution. Mr. Mayor, I'm not interested in a quiet settlement. I want real changes to your police department. What would those changes look like? Patricia had prepared for this question. Mandatory bias, training for all officers, new protocols for traffic stops, independent oversight of the police department, and a citizen review board with real power. Those are significant changes. This was a significant violation of my rights. The mayor agreed to consider her demands. Meanwhile, the two fired officers were facing their own consequences. Johnson's wife had filed for divorce, saying she could not handle the public shame. Martinez had to move out of his neighborhood because neighbors recognized him from the news coverage. Both men struggled to find new employment. The viral video made them unemployable in law enforcement or any job requiring public trust. Johnson eventually found work as a security guard at a shopping mall. The pay was a fraction of his police salary, and he had no benefits. He spent his days watching shoppers and thinking about how one night had destroyed his entire life. Martinez moved to another state, hoping to start fresh. He found work in construction, but his co-workers often recognized him from the internet. "Hey, aren't you that cop who messed with the judge?" they would ask. The psychological toll was severe. Both men suffered from depression and anxiety. They had lost their careers, their reputations, and their sense of self-worth. Back in the community where the incident occurred, the effects were also being felt. Property values in the neighborhood actually increased as people saw it as a place where injustice would not be tolerated. Mrs. Henderson started a neighborhood watch program focused on monitoring police interactions with residents. "We need to be good neighbors to everyone," she told the group. "That means speaking up when we see unfair treatment." Mr. Chen began volunteering with civil rights organizations, using his experience as a witness to the incident to educate others about racial profiling. The police department struggled with its reputation. Recruitment became difficult as the viral video made national news. Good officers were embarrassed to be associated with the department. Chief Henderson implemented even more reforms than initially planned. He hired a civilian oversight coordinator, expanded bias training, and created a community advisory board that included Judge Williams. "We're rebuilding trust," he told reporters. "It will take time, but we're committed to doing better." The federal investigation concluded 6 months later. Both officers were indicted on federal civil rights charges. They eventually pleaded guilty and were sentenced to prison time. Johnson received 18 months, Martinez received 2 years. The civil lawsuit was settled for $2.5 million. As promised, Patricia donated the entire amount to organizations working on police reform and civil rights education. At the settlement press conference, Patricia spoke about the broader implications of the case. "This was never about money," she said. "It was about justice, accountability, and change. I hope this case shows that no one is above the law, not police officers who abuse their power, and not citizens who are victims of that abuse." The case became a landmark example of how racial profiling could be successfully challenged in court. Law schools began teaching it as a case study. Police departments across the country used it as an example of what not to do. But for Patricia, the most important outcome was the change she saw in her own community. Police stops became more professional, officers were more respectful to all citizens, and people began to believe that the justice system could actually deliver justice. The two officers who had mocked her that night had learned a harsh lesson. Actions have consequences, and those consequences can last a lifetime. The seeds of lasting change had been planted. 2 years after that fateful traffic stop, Judge Patricia Williams stood before a packed auditorium at Harvard Law School, her alma mater. She was delivering the keynote speech for the Civil Rights Law Conference. The audience included law students, professors, attorneys, and activists from across the country. "When those officers pulled me over that night," Patricia began, "I thought I was just dealing with a broken taillight. I never imagined it would become a catalyst for change across the nation." In the audience, her former law professor, Dr. Elizabeth Warren, nodded with pride. Patricia had been one of her best students, and now she was using her experience to educate the next generation of legal professionals. "The incident taught me something important," Patricia continued. "Justice is not just about what happens in courtrooms. It's about what happens on street corners during traffic stops and in everyday interactions between citizens and those who serve them." The speech was being broadcast live on C-SPAN. In living rooms across America, people watched as Patricia, described the lasting changes that had come from her experience. The police department that had employed officers Johnson and Martinez had been completely transformed. Chief Henderson had resigned and been replaced by Chief Maria Santos, a reform-minded leader who had implemented sweeping changes. Under Chief Santos's leadership, the department had become a model for police reform. They had reduced excessive force incidents by 70%. Complaints against officers had dropped by 60%, and community trust in the police had reached an all-time high. "We used Judge Williams's case as a training example," Chief Santos had told reporters recently. "It shows our officers exactly what not to do and why it matters." The department now required all officers to complete 40 hours of bias training annually. They had implemented community policing programs that put officers in neighborhoods as problem solvers, not just law enforcers. And they had created a civilian oversight board with real power to investigate misconduct. Patricia's lawsuit settlement money had funded police reform programs in 12 cities. The Patricia Williams Foundation for Police Reform provided training, materials, oversight programs, and legal support for victims of police misconduct. The foundation's director, Marcus Washington, had previously been the NAACP attorney who supported Patricia's case. He now traveled the country helping communities implement police reforms. Judge Williams showed us that when someone with power and privilege experiences injustice, they can use that experience to help those without power, Washington said in a recent interview. The two officers who had caused this transformation were living very different lives now. Former Officer Johnson had served his 18-month prison sentence and was now working at a community center in Detroit. The job paid minimum wage, but he had found purpose in helping young people avoid the mistakes he had made. "I was raised better than how I acted that night," he told a group of teenagers during a discussion about respect and prejudice. "I let my biases control my actions, and it destroyed my life and hurt an innocent person." Johnson had never directly apologized to Judge Williams. His lawyer had advised against contact during the legal proceedings, and afterward, he had been too ashamed to reach out. But he thought about her every day. Former Officer Martinez had taken a different path. After serving his 2-year sentence, he had moved to a small town in Montana where no one knew his story. He worked construction and tried to forget his past. Unlike Johnson, he had never acknowledged that his actions were wrong. He still believed he had just been doing his job. The contrast between the two men showed how differently people could respond to consequences. Johnson had found redemption through service. Martinez had found only bitterness. The viral video of Patricia's traffic stop had been viewed more than 50 million times. It had become one of the most watched examples of racial profiling ever recorded. Law enforcement academies across the country now showed it to new recruits. "This is what implicit bias looks like in action," instructors would tell their classes. "And this is why we must constantly examine our own assumptions and behaviors." The video had also inspired dozens of other victims of police misconduct to come forward with their stories. A documentary filmmaker had created a powerful film called The Traffic Stop that won an Emmy Award and brought even more attention to issues of racial profiling. Patricia's children, now 14 and 16, had grown up watching their mother handle the aftermath of the incident with grace and determination. Her daughter had decided she wanted to become a civil rights lawyer. Her son was interested in police reform work. "Mom showed us that when bad things happen, you can choose to make something good come from them," her daughter had written in a school essay about heroes. Patricia's husband, David, had been amazed by how his wife had handled the situation. "She turned one of the worst nights of her life into a force for positive change," he told friends. "That's who she is." At the federal courthouse, Patricia continued her work as chief judge, but the incident had changed how she approached her role. She had created new programs to educate police officers about the law. She regularly spoke to community groups about civil rights, and she had become a national voice for police reform. Her chambers now displayed dozens of letters from people who had been inspired by her story. A young black lawyer wrote, "Your strength gave me hope that justice is possible." A retired police officer wrote, "Thank you for holding bad cops accountable while still supporting good ones." The incident had also changed how Patricia thought about her own privilege and responsibility. She now used her platform to speak for those who could not speak for themselves. I was lucky that night, she often said in speeches. Lucky that the cameras were rolling. Lucky that neighbors witnessed what happened. Lucky that I had the resources to fight back. Most people who experience what I experienced don't have those advantages. The police union that had initially defended Officers Johnson and Martinez had eventually issued a public apology to Patricia. They had also implemented new policies to prevent their members from defending officers who violated citizens' rights. We realized that protecting bad cops hurts good cops, the union president had explained. Judge Williams helped us understand that accountability makes everyone safer. 5 years after the incident, the neighborhood where Patricia had been stopped had become a symbol of positive police-community relations. The same street where she had been humiliated was now the site of an annual Community and Police Partnership Day. Chief Santos and Judge Williams both spoke at the event each year, standing near the exact spot where the traffic stop had occurred. This place used to represent everything wrong with policing, Chief Santos said at the most recent event. Now it represents how we can do better. Patricia's story had traveled far beyond her local community. She had been invited to speak at the United Nations about human rights and policing. She had testified before Congress about police reform. She had advised police departments in other countries about best practices. But perhaps her greatest achievement was quieter and more personal. The traffic stops in her community were now conducted with respect and professionalism. Young black men and women no longer feared being pulled over. Families felt safe calling the police when they needed help. On the 5th anniversary of the incident, Patricia received an unexpected letter. It was from former Officer Johnson. "Your Honor," he had written, "I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did to you was wrong, inexcusable, and harmful. But I want you to know that your grace and strength in the aftermath changed my life. I think about you every day and try to honor your example by serving others. Thank you for showing me what real leadership looks like." Patricia read the letter twice, then filed it away. She had long ago forgiven both officers, not for their sake, but for her own peace of mind. Forgiveness did not mean forgetting or excusing their actions. It meant choosing not to let their hatred poison her heart. As she sat in her chambers that evening, Patricia reflected on how one terrible night had led to so much positive change. The humiliation, the anger, and the pain had all been transformed into something greater. Justice had indeed been served, not just through courts and settlements, but through the harder work of changing hearts and minds. The two officers who had mocked her that night had thought they were dealing with just another citizen who would quietly accept their abuse. They could never have imagined that they had stopped the wrong person on the wrong night, and that their actions would ripple through time to create lasting change for millions of people they would never meet. The traffic stop was over, but the impact would last forever. In courtrooms and police stations, in law schools and community centers, in the hearts and minds of everyone who had heard her story, Judge Patricia Williams had achieved something greater than personal justice. She had helped bend the arc of the moral universe a little more toward justice for all.